Welcome, welcome, welcome. It's kind of funny because I've done 3 of these today, and every time I'm on, I have a different weather forecast. I was with Terry Seaman this morning. He's in Central Jersey, so we were talking about the snow there. 1 o'clock, it was just about stopping, and now it has officially stopped. So we are looking at about 6 inches on the ground here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a lot. We had a ton of rain yesterday, but no snow.
Well, it's actually kind of nice out now that it stopped, but we'll see. But I want to thank you for joining, Virginia. I know Claire couldn't make it today.
Yep, just the two of us holding down the fort today.
Yeah, and we're going to be talking about lions, tigers, and resumes. Oh my! For those of you who have never been here before, we talk about anything and everything. And I'm seeing Michelle. This is my 3rd session with Ken.
You're a Ken groupie.
Yeah, really. Well, Michelle, I don't know if you know the story. Michelle used to be my manager at Bed Bath & Beyond.
Oh.
Way back when. And she's with everyone else from Bed Bath, of course, she's looking. So
yeah, retail. I just feel like the hits keep on coming with retail.
I think the challenge is this: we're seeing a lot at Lehigh Harrison with the resumes. Now we're seeing a lot in very similar industries, and now it's the challenge we have right now. Honestly, is the timing, because there's so many resumes, and the question that comes up, and I guess I would ask you this question right off the bat, is at what point do you have to end your most recent job? How long can you leave that job on there? Because we have people that we know that people have actually left their jobs, but they're still leaving it on there for about a month or so, because for all different reasons. So is there a best practice from a resume standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, so look, you and I both know that LinkedIn is sort of the Wild West, where there's people that have stuff that's on there that's years old, and then stuff that they're doing that's not on there. So I certainly don't recommend leaving something on there that's 9 months old, but a couple months, I don't think it's the end of the world. But here's a technique that I use so that you can be transparent with the reader while still taking advantage of the fact that the algorithms seem to prefer people that don't have an end date on their employment. Is what I'll do is I will list, the CFO, and then I list the company name, and then the dates I'll leave as present. But then after the job title, in parentheses, I'll say, exited role to 2024. And that way you're showing the reader, you know what, I'm not there anymore, but the algorithm still sees the date as present. The other thing is, if you got some people, as part of their severance, they got, 6 months of biweekly, whatever, twice a month, whatever that term is, pay. And so technically you're still on the book. So I don't really take issue with if they're going to keep you on the books for their tax purposes, and you get to keep them on LinkedIn for your job search purposes.
Yeah, that's the thing that came up, because a lot of people actually are collecting severance, for that. And we've had the other thing that has started to happen now is that when people actually post on LinkedIn, they're much more comfortable sharing that they're looking than they were before. I think that's a good thing. We actually had an interesting open to work discussion before, and a recruiter basically was probably the first person, Janelle Rosino, who kind of poo-pooed the idea of even having it on there. And I kind of disagreed a little bit.
That's such an opinion thing. There's some people that think, oh, that looks desperate if you're doing open to work. And then there's some recruiters that say, well, I look at that first. So you don't know who you're dealing with. And you can't make everyone happy. So I'm like, I always say, just do A/B testing. Leave yours on, and then compare it to taking it off, and then see what responses you get. You can track how many views to your profile. When you keep tracking, you have metrics that allows you to make better informed decisions.
The other thing is, we were talking before about some of the best practices, some of the things that we kind of roll our eyes a little bit about, whether it's the references upon request, which I still see a lot of. I still see a street address on there quite a bit.
Yeah. If you haven't job searched in a really long time, 10 plus years, the things that have hugely changed, you don't have an objective statement. You don't list your home address, city, state, and zip suffices. You don't put, you just put your cell. You have an email that's professional, but not your company's email. But the thing that's to me has really impacted how I write today, whether it's an email, a cover letter, or resume, or my LinkedIn profiles I write, is I keep in mind that we're dealing with people mostly reading online during first round of reviews. And people do print it out, but usually it's not the first thing they do. And so you're dealing with online skim readers that have a hard time digesting dense text, and our eyes jump all over the place. So if your bullets are mushed together or your paragraphs are 5, 6 lines long, you try reading that on a mobile device, and it is brutal. And so by keeping your bullets with some spacing in between them and keeping your bullets to 2 to 3 lines, you can you make something that's tough to read much easier. And
The
that
other
well.
the other thing that I'm just curious about, it's not a right or wrong thing. I see a
Mm-hmm.
lot of resumes that have boldface as part of the text in there
Mm-hmm.
to do accomplishments. I know an ATS is not going to necessarily read
Yeah,
the
they don't read it.
boldface or not, but I know that, and we'll call that out. But I just wonder, do you think that's a good idea or not a good idea if you're sending that out to a person, whether it's a recruiter or a
No.
hiring manager, or is it just overkill?
So it depends on what the rest of your formatting looks like. If you've got a ton of other bold, then that might be overkill. But um, if you're highlighting a key part of the sentence that might be otherwise longer, then it can be beneficial. I always keep in mind that skim readers, especially online skim readers, often start sentences that don't get to the end. So the first thing I do is I front load whatever I'm writing, which means you
Hmm.
put the good stuff at the beginning of the sentence. And sometimes it can be impactful to bold it, but if you've got so much bold, then you're not making an impact with that design element.
So
What do you
Michelle
think?
actually brings up this, which is very valid. It's stuff we've talked about before. The objective summary
Mhm.
statement seems to be another area where there's mixed opinions. So how is
Yeah.
a job seeker expected to do the right thing on their journey if there's so many mixed opinions?
I mean, that's a really good question. I'll tell you my opinion, and it's grounded in a consensus from lots of different recruiters and hiring managers over the year. A summary that, number one, does not describe you with a bunch of adjectives and does not lead off with how many years you've been working. That those two things, I feel like there is consensus that when you take those things out, that's a good thing. What I like to do is go down to I look at a handful of job postings and I scroll down and I look at what the must-have requirements are, and I make sure to weave in some of those details in the summary, together with information about you. So I don't know, like if you had to have I'm just thinking like a job posting where it's a project manager role and it says, okay, you have to have PMP certification. You need to have worked with startups, and I don't know, that's so two things I'm thinking of. So I would make sure that number one, PMP, if I had the certification, would be listed up after my name. Then I might say PMP certified project manager in my sentence. And then I might say experience that includes private PE backed startups plus Fortune 100s, including blah, blah, blah. So that sentence aligns with the job posting, and the reader looks at it and says, well, that's a couple things about this person that show me why she's well suited for the role I need filled. And I also know a couple things about her or him that make them memorable. You can't go wrong
What,
with
what I,
it.
so as a follow up, it's branding to the job role you're applying for.
So
Um,
I ask to see a couple of job postings of interest, and I write to try to encompass as much as I can from that. And then what you have is a paragraph that's like 95% ready to roll. And where you can make customizations are with the headline at the very top. You might add a word here or there in the summary, but it's very minute. But it's
see,
hard. It's a hard section to write.
and I can only imagine. For me, I'm looking at the actually accomplishments of the other area, and I see so many throwaway words like experienced and
Adjective,
successful, the
adjectives, adjectives.
adjectives.
Yeah,
I mean, it's like they don't do anything, you
that's right.
know. But people have either been trained to do it or they think it's
Mhm.
necessary. And I've actually put comments in there and said, would you put this in if it wasn't successful, unless it was something you learned from? Maybe if it was a failure, you put it in, but you have to think about what you're putting down.
That's right. To me, the summary section in your resume is like that lead paragraph in a news article. It tells
Mm-hmm.
you what the story is going to be about and what you want to come back to when you have more time. The journalists don't use the lead paragraph to describe, to throw in a bunch of adjectives. They just don't, because it doesn't give you anything, it doesn't stand out from a series of other stories. They weave in, a couple of pertinent nuggets to the story.
And then, you will see the X amount of years of experience doing this and the years of experience doing that. And, you know,
That
what is that
doesn't
really?
differentiate you, because number one, ATS can count how many years, and number two, it's a waste of real estate trying to include a bit of detail that is not different from other people, and your value is not in that you've had 15 plus years. Your value is in what you did in those 15 years. So I'd rather use the space to spell that out.
So the other question, and this is something which has come up, Leah Harrison, and I've started to see resumes from people that actually list when they've left a job, why they left the job
Mm-hmm.
as part of it. Like, I left the job due to a downsizing. I left the job due to that. And I have mixed feelings about it. I don't necessarily want to know that. I don't know if a hiring manager wants to know that, but I'm looking at this kind of impartially. How do you feel if someone lists that the reason I left a job was just due to they were downsized or something?
I don't think it's a bad idea, as long as you're just taking up just a little bit of space for it.
Mhm.
Whenever you never want to leave the reader with a question in their head going, well, why did they leave? So if it's a recent job, for instance, you want to spell out why you left. If you
Mhm.
have a series of roles where it looks like every year and a half you've left, the question the person's head is, oh gosh, is this person a job jumper? And so by spelling out the why, then it makes sense. But if you've had jobs for 3 to 5 years, and then the layoff happened 3 jobs ago, then it's not relevant why you got laid off.
And I
So
think sometimes,
think about what the question is. What do you
yeah,
think?
I think, like, to some point, there's a lot of people out there that have had a lot of consulting assignments, and I've kind of framed it as listing it as consulting experience and just having them under there instead of a job. I had a person that was working in multiple places under Accenture, and I said,
Mhm.
"Who's paying you? Who's paying your? Where are your checks coming from? Coming from Accenture. So that's who your employer is.
That's
You
right.
may be on site for the other places,
Right.
but that's who your employer is."
So, and especially, Accenture is a big name to drop. That's worthwhile. But if it's sort of a little boutique consulting firm and the client name is bigger, then you want to highlight that. It all depends on
Mm-hmm.
the story, the biases that you might be facing. But to your point, if someone has been a consultant, a lot of times I see consultant resumes where they list every job like its own experience, and then you've got a 9-page resume, which is brutal. So what I like to do is, again, like you said, who paid the bills? Accenture. Then boom, that's a
Mm-hmm.
top tier, a big four firm. You list that you worked at a big four in your branding, because that differentiates you. And then you have your bullets are sort of case studies. And if you can't name drop the client that you worked for, the engagement, then instead of saying, I don't know, I worked with Wells Fargo, then you say top tier US bank or global multinational bank or whatever. You sort of allude to what the client is, so that the reader can get that.
I think a lot of people are kind of married to their resume and all their experiences too, because when we talk to them about eliminating things, they're like, really? Yeah. I mean, no one really cares to that level about what you've done in the past.
Even our own
Um,
mothers don't.
no,
Even our own mothers don't read our own resumes. Yeah.
but my pushback is, if it's something that you did 20, 30 years ago and it's relevant, to put it in the branding statement or somewhere else. If it really is an accomplishment, and then a lot of times it's not that major an accomplishment anymore, but it was to them because of where they were.
So your question, what you said, is it relevant? So whatever it is about that older role that's relevant, you
Mhm.
include. And so when I interview people, I ask them, I have them walk me through role by role. And so with the earlier stuff, the stuff that's pre 15 years ago, which is what, like 2000 and I can't do the math, 2009,
2008. I guess it's 2008 now.
yeah.
Oh,
Then I say, okay, well, what about that experience do you still use today, or do you think you'll use in that role? Or why are you glad you had that experience? What maybe that cemented your industry expertise? Maybe that cemented your ability to work in a certain kind of environment. Maybe you learned about a job function from the ground up that way. So if that is what's relevant, then that's the line you include. Maybe it's that you worked with a couple of really big names, and then so you just say, learn these skills working with these companies, and then you just list all the companies, and then you don't need to go into the details of the job, but it's a brief section. It allows you to sort of showcase what's relevant without taking a ton of real estate, and that way the rest of your resume can focus on what you've done since 2008, 2009.
And that's where the LinkedIn profile goes in handy too. You can list every job there. And there's almost an advantage of doing that because you never know who's on your network.
So yeah, and I've heard different people say, "Oh, you shouldn't include the old stuff on LinkedIn because of age discrimination." I sort of feel differently about it. I always think about, I call it the rabbit hole phenomenon, and rabbit hole phenomenon to me happens on resumes, where when you see stuff that's much older than 15 years ago, you go, "Oh gosh, I wonder where they went to school. I wonder if they know this person that knows that person." Just our brains go into a totally different direction, and removing earlier dates eliminates that from our heads. But with LinkedIn, you have to keep on clicking if you're interested. And if something that happened back when is interesting, you would have to keep scrolling to get to it. And so then you've overcome the rabbit hole. And so then if something's relevant, it does. I err on the side of including it, and I don't care when it happened.
No, I do too. I do leave things off on my LinkedIn. Like, I'm going to leave off the dates from when I went to school because it's not relevant to me. But for the most part, you want to be found.
Well, and I need to check with Tom Pounder, who is he teaches the NCOPE course with the NRW, National Resume Writers Association. And one thing that he used to say is that when hiring managers use LinkedIn Recruiter, which is one of the tools that LinkedIn sells, they can check for having a degree, and then you need to have the dates on there. So there's times when having your dates does help.
You'd have to double check that. See, you have to double check that because again, LinkedIn Recruiter, there's different rules for that as well.
That's the thing. You have to think about what the audience is. Yeah.
Right. I'm not looking per se, so it doesn't concern me as much.
Yeah.
But I need to know what to tell my clients, for sure.
That's right.
So again, just a couple of comments. If the job description requires X number of years, you definitely need to have those years in your summary.
I don't think so. I feel like the ATS can count that up easily.
I
disagree, but everyone, like I said, I always tell people everyone has opinions. That's my opinion.
Right.
But if 3 or 5 people say the same thing, then there's something that needs to be considered.
I think for me, there's so many ATSs out there, and I have worked with a couple of them. But it's a fool's errand to try to keep track of them. Right. I keep saying, yes, you have to apply for the ATS, but that's probably not how you're getting a job.
Well, ATS is just a filing system. Yep. It is not a gatekeeper that way. It takes the information, it parses it, it files it, and stores it away. A lot of people don't realize that if you submit online and you're getting an immediate rejection, it's likely that knockout questions were programmed into it. And knockout questions are where I can tell that there's a good chance there's going to be a knockout question is when I go to the job posting and I look in it where it says must have this, must have that. And if you don't show that, then you might get an immediate rejection. And so the person programmed that in. It wasn't your resume being rejected by ATS or anything like that. It's a human being programmed that information in.
So I think you'll double check about the dates for the enrollment to see how that. I'm assuming that he means the check mark. However you determine you can put the dates or not the dates in. Like you can deselect the dates.
Oh, you're talking about like when you're listing it as present?
I think, and Jonathan, just clarify, are you talking about the dates on a job or are you talking about the enrollment dates? Just if you can just put another comment in, that would be helpful.
I was actually on a call earlier where the Tom Pounder leads a class every month, and we listen, and he talks about the latest things that LinkedIn does and how it impacts job seekers. That Easy Apply is actually including more knockout questions.
Okay.
So
That's interesting. I've heard that the number of statistics that LinkedIn shows for applies is not necessarily the number of people that actually apply for the job.
Mm-hmm. I've seen that too. That it's not always super accurate. But the fact that they are going towards more, that they are including knockout questions, I think that's interesting.
Yeah, I think in some ways it's probably better if the enrollment questions are valid. We were talking before, and Janella, the recruiter, basically said you need to have at least the top 3 or 4 skills within a job spec, and the other ones are not as important. Because usually when they do job specs, they prioritize them. The must-haves, because it's not easy for people to determine.
Yeah, it's funny. What I love about LinkedIn's job section, I love that the job postings have skills that are included. I love that I can search for keywords aligned with the job posting using their resume builder, but I don't love LinkedIn Easy Apply. And I always see if there's a way, I always recommend people see if they can bypass it either by going directly to the company's website or another, or get in touch with the hiring manager directly and trying to get some human interaction that way.
What I wonder about, I've never gotten the answer. When you do a LinkedIn Easy Apply, does it go into a different bucket than the ATS? I mean, how is it determined where it's seen by?
They have they have their own portal.
They have their own portal. So if I apply for a job on LinkedIn, if it's not connected to their system, their career site, when you apply,
like, you mean to like the company's
yeah,
ATS?
yeah,
I think they're two different areas.
yeah, I would, but I'm saying, so then if it goes to a LinkedIn Easy Apply portal and then they send the information there, then I wonder, can you apply in 2 places?
I don't see why you couldn't, but I don't know. That's a good question.
I know. I mean, so again, so Linda Brubaker, as a former recruiter, I don't think you need to add the number of years of experience you have in your summary. Number of years in a job description is often aspirational, not necessarily the required. Human eyes and an ATS can count the years of experience.
There you go. That's 2 opinions. We need 3 more, and then it's worth considering.
Now, Jonathan said enrollment when we talked about the dates for the check mark. So I think he's talking about enrollment in colleges.
Oh, okay. So my understanding is that let me confirm it with Tom, but my understanding was that as of like 6 months ago, you needed to have dates on your college to have it show up. But I don't know how many recruiters are requiring college degrees anymore. So I don't know if that is even as relevant anymore. But that information has prompted me to change and recommend that people include their dates of graduation or their dates that they attended in LinkedIn.
Well, that brings up a good point, because not everyone that I work with has finished college.
Right.
So I've been pushing for, just say you attended college, and maybe list some of your coursework, because I've seen resumes with high school, which
so you could put BA studies, BA English coursework, and you could put the dates that you were enrolled there. You do that on your resume too. I think that's a really good idea.
And I think that a lot of these things, it brings up the other frustration that a lot of us are seeing when people are losing their jobs now. They're getting pounced on by all these recruiting people right away. Hire me, hire me, hire me. And I just think before you decide how you're going to reach out to people, because you probably have enough information to go on your own, at least as a starting point. I mean, Virginia, you're an expert in the field. I could never attempt to do what you do. And I wouldn't portray myself that way because I don't have that experience. I mean, what I do for Lee Act Harrison is kind of like triage. It's not the same thing as what you do.
Right, right.
And I think that there's different ways to go about it. I mean, when you're going through the process, I'm sure you're having, you're talking to them, you're asking them a bunch of questions, you're showing them proofs.
Yeah, the high touch one-on-one. What you're doing is trying to give best practices based on in doing it in mass. You're drinking from a fire hose.
Yeah, I think the thing is you just don't know sometimes what's going to work and what isn't going to work. I mean, yes, if a job description require see, and this is I don't want to say I agree or disagree, but again, if a job description says it must have X amount of years, you need to list it. So I'm going to push back on this, Kathy. Who says the job requirement requires X amount of years? It's the
Sometimes it
hiring
says
man.
it.
What?
Sometimes it will say it. I've seen that on job postings.
No, no, no. But I'm saying it may be that you don't need those years of experience. Now they may be asking for it, but that's not to say that you don't have. I understand what you're saying. You need to list it to get past the ATS or something, but there's so many times when they require experience based on what the past has shown them, based on what they need.
So if a company has spent the money to advertise for a posting, they probably have an ATS. If
Okay.
it is a situation where it's a small company and the hiring manager is posting it on their socials, that's a different situation. But again, then you're following up with a person directly and you're making that human connection. So, I mean,
So
because there's really expensive ATSs and there's cheap ATSs.
So I'm just looking, Linda. There are very few jobs for which a degree is actually required. I'm still suggesting that college dates are optional. I'm not seeing college degree as one of the search terms being used to find potential people to talk with. And that might be a LinkedIn recruiter thing.
Yeah, that's
Um,
what I need. I'm going to double check that with Tom, but that's what we were going on. It's one of the things that you can check.
yeah, I think, you know, in this day and age with a college degree, it's great to have one, but unless it's a field that requires something,
Mm-hmm.
then that's being short-sighted.
Yeah. It's it's a balancing act. And so I don't just write for one job posting. I try to see 4 or 5 so that I can get a sense of what is happening in that industry. And then make my decisions based on that.
So when you talk to people about resumes and like, do you work with them on a potential range of what the salary should be based on your knowledge? Because sometimes people don't necessarily know, or they're going to rely on a glass door or something like
Mm-hmm.
that. Um,
I mean, because I'm old, I sort of have a sense for what roles are paying, but um, how I tell people to figure out what the
like for
range.
example, someone's applying for a job as a project manager, and it's a
Mhm.
project manager, a senior project manager. They may have no idea what they're looking to make. Now, I can suggest go to Glassdoor, and there's all different things to consider with that. Um, but that isn't the entire picture.
It's not, and what I this is not a perfect way to do it, but I like to get a variety of sources. So like a Glassdoor or like a what's that one called? Payscales.com or salary.com. There's a couple of different
Right.
ones. And then now there's certain states where they have to put a range. And people are trying to game the system and they're putting, ranges from 2,000 to 2 million. Like they're gaming it. But if you can get a handful of sources to figure out, okay, this is what the range is in this state, then I can figure out the cost of living difference and try to extrapolate a solid range. And then in negotiating, you're supposed to aim for like 85% of that range.
And Linda said payscale.com too.
Mm-hmm.
The
There's a
other
couple
thing,
different sites. Yeah.
the other thing that that I struggle with is where just remind people that when you look at a job spec, you need to be clear on what they're saying. If it's hybrid, how long is it going to stay hybrid, and what does hybrid mean? And remote and the like, because you don't know, and you have to get the clarification because you don't want to go down that whole rabbit hole and find out that there was misinformation for
Did you
whatever
see there
reason.
was a couple of people posted these job postings where it said remote, and then it like at the bottom it said must be in the office 2 days a week or something like that. Yeah. Yeah, remote roles, fully remote roles have become such a small percentage of what's out there. I do feel like there's a lot of more hybrid, but the definition of hybrid varies. Um, but if you are targeting remote only, you need to you need to include, there's things that I like to work to include on my resume, and then you have to do the extra work to pound the pavement to find those jobs. Applying online is going to be brutal for those, because you're competing against the masses. But one thing I'll do is I will make sure that I list that the role was remote. I'll talk about how I worked with people across time zones, across countries. I'll talk about how I use different technologies, and I'll list those technologies to sort of show that you can be effective without being in the office.
Yeah, I think one of the things which I find very helpful is when I talk to fellow job seekers. We do all these networking groups, and they can share a lot of information just based on what they've been seeing in the workforce, even more than me. I mean, I read up on things, but it's interesting to understand what they're thinking about, and and I think they're more educated now about what's going on. But I think a lot of the job seekers still struggle about what to do. And we had a conversation yesterday. I said that, brought this up in one of my other meetings. We had an MD who was looking to do a little bit of a career pivot, and she tried to
MD,
explain
like managing director or like doctor.
She was a medical director, and she was looking to do something with medical research or something.
Okay.
So we all tried to, job seekers and myself, we tried to understand exactly what that meant. What does that look like?
What is that title in another company, you mean?
Talk to me as a 7 or 8-year-old, like, what does this entail? And she couldn't really explain it that way. And I said, well, think about it from the perspective of you're going to have to present that. If you're going to be doing some writing and you're going to do some freelance writing, that's one thing. If you're going to be at a corporation writing medical papers, I mean, I don't know enough about the industry per se, but I know enough to know that there are questions I would ask. And I'm sure as a resume writer, you'd probably be thinking the same thing.
Well, I get people that say, well, this is what my role was at this company, but I don't really know if it's called something else. I don't know what kinds of roles I would target. And so I tell people to go on like Indeed.com, because all the postings on most of the postings on Indeed are free to post. So you get a ton of them. Where LinkedIn, people have to pay to post. And then type in the skills with the plus sign, the and sign. So think of the top 5 skills and sort of add those into a big list with plus in between each word, and see what jobs pop up. And read through those. And I feel like that is helpful.
It is. I think the other thing, and I really am dying to get your perspective on this, and it's the whole thing with acronyms on a resume. We've had 2 conversations about this, about when are too many acronyms, when are there too many, or when are there not enough, and when should they be there. We all go through acronyms like crazy, and some are probably company related, some are industry related.
Some are industry, that's right, yeah. So if you're targeting industry, I like to sometimes if it is, it's hard because I've been writing these for so many years now, but if there is an industry like KPI, that's the term, or the IRS, the whole world knows what those mean and in KPIs, anyone who's a hiring manager knows what that means. I don't feel the need to spell that out, but there's certain industry words that you want to pepper in that you know them, but to be on the safe side, spell it out once and then use the acronym going forward.
Like we had YOY, which is year over year. We understood that.
Right.
The same
That's
way.
one that's sort of universal to me. Same with like EOY, especially in sales roles, finance roles. So you have to think about what your target is. A lot of times people use the acronyms in job postings. So if you see them in the postings, then you're probably okay. IT, there's a ton. Federal government, there's a ton. Back to your earlier point, I was thinking about that managing director. What I see are people that their industry has been hard hit. And so then they're like, well, what else can I do? I want to be open to anything. And so what I advise people is to look at the Bureau of Labor and Statistics stuff and see where the hiring opportunities seem to be and what industries are hiring, and then see if you can pivot into something that's sort of ancillary to what you do now. And that might be a way to get into sort of a high growth sector. So like the 3 sectors that are growing right now, I was just speaking with Oh my gosh, I'm spacing on her name now. She's a recruiter. But hospitality, healthcare, government, and she was saying manufacturing seems to be on the rise. So those are 4 sectors where there's a lot of growth. So if you're a CFO or a finance executive, maybe there is an industry that's sort of ancillary to yours that would be a logical
Mhm.
fit for you to jump into that. And by writing about the commonalities, you might be able to pivot into that versus sort of blindly applying anywhere.
And I think the whole idea of AI will be a burgeoning industry too once people figure out exactly what that looks like. I mean, there's going to be a need for people to work behind the scenes, whether it's management or governance or something like that, I would think.
I've been getting offers. They don't pay enough to leave my day job, but to rate for to do prompt reviews for large language models. They want people with English and journalism degrees to go in and proof
Hmm.
like responses and stuff, which I found interesting.
Well, if anyone's out there who needs a job,
You have an English major.
I mean, English majors are probably looking for jobs. A lot of the people actually, and this is what I say to the younger people. I said, it's not where you start, it's where you finish. They graduated with a degree in one thing doesn't mean they're going to end up in that field.
Yes, I tell my kids. I have 3 kids in college right now, and I'm like, I was like, top of the top 10 jobs out there now, like 4 of them didn't exist 10 years ago. So don't stress about your major.
Absolutely. So, I think I want to cut it just because, I don't want to take up too much of your time, and we'll take it from there. This was a great conversation,
Yeah.
and we will have Claire back next month,
Next month will be audio.
audio for sure. And I want to thank everyone for attending. And if you attended 3 times today, put it in the chat. I would love to know who attended 3 times today, because it shows that you guys are really, really amazing.
Absolutely. And Linda, thank you for those resources.
All right. So have a great day, everyone. Happy Valentine's Day. And take care.
All right. Bye, guys.
Bye.